like what we were in 1947.
All right, thank you so much, Ajay, for all that information. With that, viewers, we are shifting our focus now to some international news, where a Syrian court has sentenced the country's ousted President Bashar Al-Assad to death in absentia. The Syrian court has also sentenced Atif Najib, the former head of political security in southern Syria's Deraa province, to death. The court has convicted Assad, who was ousted in December 2024, over charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity. During the Syrian civil war, Najib, the cousin of Assad, was accused of overseeing the torture of detainees, including children, and of being responsible for multiple deaths during the conflict. With that, let's take a look at who the Syrian ousted President Bashar al-Assad is. So let's take a look at that, and let's also take a look at the entire timeline of how this has happened over the years, to give you a brief overview of the situation and why this court order actually matters. So who is Bashar al-Assad? Let's look at, he is Syria's longtime ruler, and he became Syria's president in 2000, succeeding his father Hafiz al-Assad. So his father was ruling over Syria since 1971 and till 2000. So it was a very long rule, and after that he succeeded his father in 2000. In 2011, the uprising begins. So everyone remembers the spring uprising in Syria that happened in 2011, and anti-government protests erupted across Syria, which later escalated into a devastating civil war. Then there was years of war and crackdown. Since 2011, we've seen Syria being battered because of these problems, and Assad's government faced widespread allegations of war crimes and crimes against humanity during the conflict. And since there was a lot of protest against the government, a lot of people coming out on the streets against the government, there was a brutal crackdown by the government to control all these protests, and hence these crimes against humanity and war crime charges also come into the picture against Assad. Well, in December 2024, let's see what happens. The regime collapses, and after opposition forces advanced on Damascus, Assad fled Syria for Russia, ending his 24-year rule. So when he came into power in 2000, after that for 24 years he was still in power, bringing all those crackdowns allegedly, and now he has been convicted by the court of all the war crimes that have been committed during and under his presidency. So let's look at the death sentence, what has been awarded to him. A Damascus criminal court on Tuesday has reportedly sentenced Assad to death in absentia over crimes committed during his rule. Now, why was this done is because he fled to Russia right after the regime collapsed in December 2024. So let's take a brief, we've taken a brief overview of who he is. Let's look at the timeline now as to how and when the regime collapse actually happened, because this conflict has been going on since 2011. So let's see how the fall of Bashar al-Assad actually started. There was an offensive on November 27, 2024. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, backed by allies. So this is a group, HTAS. This was backed by allies and launched a surprise offensive from Idlib, and that's when all of this actually started. And late November, what happened was rebels rapidly seized Aleppo and then pushed on to take control of Idlib, Hama and Homs in quick succession. So over late November, what happened was the rebels then started taking control of the major cities in Syria, including Aleppo. And November to December 2024, during this offensive, Assad's army weakened after years of war and reduced backing. So there was obviously years of conflict and war that the regime had been facing since 2011, and this renewed effort, this renewed offensive that started late in 2024 actually saw that the army was very weak during that time. Now, his main allies were unable or unwilling to save him. Now, remember that if your government is facing protests since a very long time for over a decade, the allies also seem to be very wary of their support. And also, let's look at how Iran and Hezbollah had been badly weakened by Israeli strikes as well during this entire period, so there was no support for them. Russia halted the airstrikes it had been running in support of Assad's forces on December 8 during that time. So Russia also stopped the air support. There were rebel forces like HTS, Syrian National Army, and southern factions swept into Damascus overnight. So overnight we see a political change happening, and opposition forces declared Syria as liberated as they surged into the capital. So December 8 is the day of the fall that has been registered in the history books, and Assad fled by plane to Russia, joining family members already there, and was granted asylum by the Russian government over there. This all happened on December 8 when there was a rapid, quick succession of falling of cities like Damascus as well. And Russia reportedly persuaded Assad and his family to go into exile in Moscow. So Russia also played a big role in this during the December 8, 2024 fall of Damascus to other forces. So Russia played a big role, and this also ended the 54 years of Assad family rule and the Baath party dominance. So remember, we already informed you that he came and succeeded his father, who was ruling since 1971. The aftermath, let's look at January 2025. HTS leader Ahmad al-Shara became a de facto leader, later appointed as president. So we already are seeing the opposition churning the wheels of the government. Then in March 2025, a caretaker government became a transitional one. So we had a caretaker government in place in March, but then that transformed into a transitional government, and a constitutional declaration actually set a 5-year transition period. So that government was then secure for the next 5 years in March 2025. Now, sectarian violence also flared that month. In March 2025, there was some kind of violence in the country, even though Assad had fled. Now, Turkey and Israel moved to occupy parts of northern and southwestern Syria, respectively. And obviously, you have surrounded the borders. Turkey and Israel surrounded the borders, and also, in fact, started out, occupying all these parts. All right, let's get in a word from a defense expert, Colonel T.P. Tyagi, who is joining us now on the broadcast for more on this. Colonel Tyagi, this is a historic judgment that is coming to the fore. A court in Damascus has reportedly sentenced Assad to death, and also his cousin, and they have blamed him allegedly for war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Yes, you are right. Is there any example where a dethroned dictator has not been killed or has not been put to death? It always happens. A dictator, when the end sees nearby, he either takes asylum in some other country or gets killed. In this case, Bashar Al-Assad, he moved to Russia. In fact, Russian planes took him to Russia along with his family, and he is now in Russia. He has been sentenced to death. His younger brother has also been sentenced to death. And one of his cousin, who is Nazib, he is a brigadier general. He also has been sentenced to death. This family has been ruling Syria for almost about 50 years. And their rule has been very, very autocratic. The type of crimes which they have committed are unbearable, unexplainable. His father, that is Bashar al-Assad's father, he was also a dictator. He also killed a number of people, and similarly, Bashar al-Assad also killed number of people. Any sort of opposition from any corner of the country was ruthlessly butchered. This Brigadier General Nazib, he is reported to have killed children below 15 years in the southern part of Syria. So their regime has been full of crimes, giving a death sentence in Damascus to Bashar al-Assad and his family, and that too by the government of whom? The government of terrorists, the government of Al-Shara. This Al-Shara is basically a terrorist of Al-Qaeda, and he came to Syria, and in a lightning strike, he managed to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. Bashar and this Al-Shara, who was a Al-Qaeda terrorist, now Donald Trump has given him a helping hand, and he has strengthened his regime. And that's why, can we expect any
All right.
other... Hello?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for your valuable perspective on this issue. We have to move on to some other breaking news coming in from Tamil Nadu. Well, the Tamil Nadu Legislative Assembly